Hey, good morning. Sorry, I was back there fascinated by Merlinda's story, as I'm sure many of you were. So let me see a show of hands. How many of you are from Florida? Okay, wonderful. Everybody whose hand is not up, your job is to move to Florida. This is the greatest state in the country. Yes, you can applaud that, yeah. We're showing what these conservative principles mean and what they can do. And I really like this socialism sucks. I really like that. Because, by the way, it really does. My family comes from a country that is still a communist socialist dictatorship. There are many people who are in Florida right now whose families have fled socialist countries, and they come to this country for opportunity. And that's the most important thing about the United States of America, in my opinion, is the freedom and the ability of anybody from anywhere to do anything, as long as you're willing to work hard and play by the rules. So let me tell you a little bit about my career path, how I ended up where I am today. You see, I started in the grassroots in 1996 on the Bob Dole for President campaign. I literally just walked into the front door in the summer there and said, I want to help. And they put me to work. I licked envelopes, made phone calls, knocked on doors, canvassing, everything that you guys are doing this year, I started out doing in 1996 and continued doing for many years. I also went to school. I also worked in the private sector in real estate development and construction, but every free moment that I had, I would either dedicate it to finding a wife, having some fun, or getting Republicans elected to office, whether it was at the local level, the state legislative level, federal, and presidential elections. In 2002, I ran for the Florida House of Representatives, my first campaign, and I dedicated my entire life to that campaign. I did nothing more than every day. I would wake up, I was knocking on the first door by 10 a.m., and I would knock on doors all day long from 10 a.m. until sundown, every day, 7 days a week. I hit about 10 to 12,000 doors by myself that summer. And I put, $140,000 of my own money into that race. I was dead broke at the end of that campaign. But that's how important these principles and this movement and this goal was to me. And I lost my first race by about 500 votes. And I thought, oh my goodness, the world is coming to an end. How could this be? I was supposed to win this thing. But I didn't realize it then, but I realize it obviously now and later on. It was the best thing that could have happened to me for many reasons. One, in between that cycle, 02 and 04, I met my wife. So for the applaud that I got for that, I made it happen. And then in 2004, I did it again. In Miami-Dade County, state house districts aren't probably like Merlinda's. Down there, the districts are very compact, very tight, very close together. So I ran for a neighboring district, which literally you could throw a rock from where I was before and hit the other district. And I ran just as hard, just as intense in 2004. So in 2002, I lost 51-49. In 2004, I won 85-15. And I got elected to the Florida House of Representatives, started serving in November of 2004. And I served 4 two-year terms there in the Florida House of Representatives. I chaired the Committee on Business Regulation. I chaired the Committee on Government Affairs. I was a majority whip of the House, and I was majority leader of the State House. I was there for 8 years, and I primarily focused on one policy area. I got several pieces of advice when I got to the legislature. One piece was, don't try and know everything about everything. Try and know everything about one particular subject matter. Be the person that everybody goes to on that subject, rather than trying to be the person everybody goes to on every subject matter. Because in government, unfortunately, government is large, and it touches a lot of subjects. You have healthcare, you have tax policy, agriculture. In Florida, we have a lot of tourism issues, economic development, local affairs. So I focused primarily on property taxes. That was my passion. My background was real estate. I already had an understanding of the policy, and that's what I focused on for 8 years. And I had several successes. In my freshman year, I was able to succeed in getting a constitutional amendment on the ballot to double the homestead exemption for low-income seniors. Now, why did I focus on that? Well, in my 2 campaigns before I got elected to the state house, I sat in thousands, and I mean thousands, of living rooms. And many of them were low-income seniors, people whose only source of income was their Social Security check. And many of them were widows or widowers, so they were a single-income household. But they lived in the most valuable investment that they had in their life, their home. They had paid it off. So they didn't have a mortgage, but they had to pay for their insurance. They had to pay for the electric bill, the cable bill. They had to pay for their medications. They had to pay their property taxes. And I sat in the home of seniors who were literally sweating profusely because their air conditioning wasn't on. And I would ask them, why don't you turn on your air conditioning? They said, well, I'm trying to keep my electric bill low because if it goes too high, I won't be able to afford my medication. Now, I knew I wasn't going to be able to make a big impact on the price of their medication because you have federal issues, you have, Medicare, Medicaid, but I could make an impact on their property tax bill. And that's why I focused on that. Now, it's not easy to get a constitutional amendment through a legislative process, especially if you're a freshman. Now, I didn't do it by standing on the floor of the House and pointing fingers and demagoguing the issue and calling people names. There was this one chairman of a committee who didn't want to hear the bill. Frankly, he didn't want to hear any of the bills. So every day, without fail, I would print out a letter respectfully requesting that the bill be agended every single day. And I would sign it, put it in an envelope, and hand deliver it to him every single day during session, without fail. It got to the point where he was getting a little frustrated with me, and there was another legislator whose business, because it's a part-time legislature, his business was funeral homes. So he got a stack of the business cards of this undertaker who was a legislator and started handing me the card of the undertaker every day that I would hand him the letter. He'd say, your bill's dead. Here's the card. But I didn't give up every day. At the end of the session, 2 bills moved that dealt with property taxes. And one of them was that one. One was the one I sponsored. And I was proud that I was able to accomplish that. Not because of headlines, not because of prestige, not because of anything other than I knew that that policy would help those people who I would sit in their living rooms and see them sweating. And I knew that that legislation that would lower their taxes may go that much farther to allowing them to turn on their AC, maybe 2 more days a week, maybe 1 more day a week, but it would make a difference. And that, at the end of the day, is why what you guys do and why people who run for office and why this movement is so important, because it really does affect real people in their lives. Government does affect people's lives, many times in a negative way, but in many occurrences, if you elect the right people, it can affect them in a positive way. So I spent the 8 years focusing on property tax policy. I made it easier for you to appeal the value of your property. I made it easier for you to lower your property value so you could lower your property taxes. I passed the toughest mortgage fraud laws in the country. And after I finished in the legislature, I ran for an office that doesn't get a lot of attention, is not very prestigious, but it makes a big difference in people's property taxes. It's called property appraiser. So in Miami-Dade County, there's a property appraiser. And what the property appraiser does is the office sets the value of every property in the county, and every county has one. And that value is used to determine what the property taxes will be based on the tax rate that is applied to that value. It also affects, whether or not you get a homestead exemption. All the exemptions that are available. There's veterans exemption, there's a widower's exemption, there's a disability exemption. There are a lot of things that affect the property value and your property taxes. And I was not satisfied with what the incumbent property appraiser was doing, so I ran against him and I challenged him. In a countywide election, Miami-Dade County is about 2.6 million people. It's larger than 13 states. To put it in perspective, the state that Merlinda was a legislator in, New Hampshire, is half the size. That state is half the size of Miami-Dade County, of that one county in this state. And I ran a countywide election against the incumbent, and I beat him. And at the time, I was the sitting Republican Majority Leader of the State House and the sitting Republican State Committee man of the local party. Now, for those of you who are not from Florida, and maybe not from Miami, Miami-Dade County is not a place where Republicans are usually successful in winning countywide elections. But I did it because I ran on my principle and I worked harder than the other guy, and I had many people like you helping me, knocking on doors. Now, when I got there, I really got to put conservative policy to work. So you're talking about an office of about 350 employees, budget north of $20 million. In a county with 20,000 employees in county government and a county budget of about $5-6 billion. So in the grand scheme of things of this county, it's not a big piece of the county operations, but in comparison to some smaller counties, it's a big office, a big budget. And I wanted to reduce the budget. I wanted to make it more efficient, and then more importantly, I wanted to make it more customer friendly. So that's what I focused on. So if you're going into an organization like this, and you're looking to cut a budget in a year where healthcare costs are going up because of Obamacare, retirement costs are going up because they just go up because of the collective bargaining agreements, it's not easy to line item and lower a budget. But I committed to it, and I set my sights on it, and I made it happen. One of the ways I did it was going line by line in the salaries of the employees of the office. And there was this one name with a salary of nearly $100,000 a year. It was the same name that would appear on an email that I would get every morning of people who were not at work. Because every morning I would get an email. These are the people who are absent today. And there was one name who was on that email every day. And when I saw his name on the budget and I saw how much he made, I said, man, this guy makes a lot of money and he's never here. What's going on with that? Oh, well, he's the union representative. He doesn't show up. He doesn't have to show up because of the union. I said, what do you mean he doesn't have to show up? No, it's per the collective bargaining agreement, they pick one person from this office who works for the union full-time. And I said, but he's paid by the taxpayers? Yeah. And the answer was that I got was like, yes, like it was just normal. And it was ridiculous to me. So I started sending emails to this employee. What do you do? What do you do? I understand that you work for the union, but you're being paid by the taxpayers, and I think that they should know what you do. So what is it that you do? I was stonewalled. No response. Again, another respectful email. I understand that you work for the union, but what do you do? You work for the taxpayers. No response. This went on for about a month. So it got to the point where I said, well, since you have chosen not to respond to me on any of my previous requests for a description of what you do, I can assume you do nothing. So therefore, show up for work on Monday morning, 9 a.m. Or you will face disciplinary action. Now, how many of you think he showed up for work at 9 a.m. Monday morning? You're right, he didn't. So I started the process to fire him. Now, wouldn't you know, That's when I got a call from the county attorney's office saying, oh, you can't do that. You can't fire him. This is per the collective bargaining agreement. I said, well, wait a second. I was elected to run this office by the citizens of this county. I was elected to be a steward of their money, which is their taxes that are paying for all of these things. And you're telling me I can't make this decision? This guy won't even tell me what he does. They said, nope. Well, why is that? Well, you're not a constitutional officer. You're just an elected department head. And I said, well, wait a second. When this office was made an elected office, it should have been a constitutional office. Nope. You're an elected department head. So I ended up having to sue the county as the sitting property appraiser. It was a really interesting county commission meeting when I stood before the county commission asking them for the authority and the ability to sue them. It was pretty entertaining. But I wasn't there to make them happy. I wasn't there to make the county attorney happy. I wasn't there to make the labor unions happy. I was there to serve the people who were paying all those salaries, all those bills, the taxpayers. And that is lost a lot of times by people in government. They forget that what funds government is taxes. Government does not produce revenue. It does not produce profit. It collects taxes. And those taxes are dollars that are earned by people who do have to go to work to earn them, who do try and create a profit, who do start a business or do a job that is productive and makes our economy work. So I didn't get off on the good foot with the labor unions, and something happened a little later that they didn't like either. So we had an election, a local election for some bond referendum in Miami-Dade County. It was a countywide election. And the labor contract said that on election day, I had to give paid time off to the county employees at the expense of the taxpayers so that they could go vote. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. We've had early voting in the very lobby of the very building that they work in for the last 2 weeks. It's a one-question ballot. They could not just pass by and do the voting on their way into work or during the lunch break. I said, nope, you have to give the paid time off. So I said, that seems a little ridiculous, but that's okay. If I have to do it, I want anybody who's going to take this paid taxpayer time off, I want them to document, I want that in writing, that they're going to go vote. 79 employees of the Office of the Property Appraiser took the time off, documented that they were going to go vote. And then I went back and I did what a lot of people talk about doing in government, but don't often do. I went back and I checked if they voted after the fact. I ended up suspending 40 employees without pay because they took the time off to go vote, and then I went and checked and see if they voted, and they did not vote. Actually, I was fact-checked by the media on this story a couple weeks back. And I usually say, when I'm telling that story, I usually say 40 because it's a nice round number. It was not 40, I have to admit. The media caught me. It was not 40. It was actually 41. But you don't hear stories like that a lot, about people holding government accountable. But that's part of what it means to be a conservative, I believe, as well. Accountability, because it's one thing to have pieces of paper with a lot of words on them saying what we should not, cannot do. But pieces of paper with words on them are meaningless and powerless and useless unless somebody is willing to hold somebody else accountable for what it says. And in government, I have found, in my opinion, in my experiences, if you're not holding government accountable, it will try and get away with things that it's not supposed to. And I've seen it firsthand. The Office of the Property Appraiser also needs vehicles. Every year, there are 1 million properties in Dade County. And you need vehicles for the appraisers to go out into the community and look at properties and assess their value. So we needed 17 cars for the year. And when I was given a price by the county's department that owns the vehicles, because they were going to charge against my office's budget, this is the cost against your office's budget. I said, wow, that's a lot of money. And now I have experience in the real world, in the private sector, in business, in real estate. And in the real world, you always try and get a second price, and then you negotiate, and you play one side against the other to get the best price that you can. So I went and got a second price from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Would you believe that going to Enterprise Rent-A-Car for those vehicles, instead of using the vehicles that the Miami-Dade County actually owned, I saved $20,000 by going to Enterprise Rent-A-Car. A private sector rental car company was $20,000 cheaper than the government-owned vehicles that had already been bought and paid for by the taxpayers. And that was at the county. I went through all that. I also had the unions file 2 unfair labor practice complaints against me. So in the management-labor relationship, the strongest complaint that labor can file against management is an unfair labor practice complaint. There's nothing stronger than that, nothing higher than that. And they filed 2 against me in 1 year. The first one was because when I got there, I wanted to also have things in the office that increased morale and productivity. So we had 3 floors in this building, and in the break rooms, I added convenient, vending machines. Vending machines with, potato chips and candy bars, sodas in each break room of each floor. And I used the revenue from those vending machines and created a fund called the Employee Recognition Trust Fund. Now, that Employee Recognition Trust Fund, the only thing that I had used that for, that money, which was about probably $3,000 for the whole year. That was the amount of revenue that was generated from those vending machines. And the only ones using the vending machines were the employees of the office. They weren't available to the public. So the only thing that I had used those vending machine revenues for was every month we'd go to Costco or BJ's and buy a sheet cake, and everybody whose birthday it was that month would get a piece of cake. We'd sing happy birthday, have your cake, go back to work. That was the only thing that I had used that for. Would you believe that the labor union filed a complaint against me, an unfair labor practice complaint, because I did not negotiate the birthday cake practice with them? I'm not kidding. I didn't know what they wanted to negotiate, maybe the color of the frosting, chocolate or vanilla, but they filed a complaint against me. And this is government we're talking about. Now, the labor lawyers of the government side said, this is a slam dunk case. You're going to win this case, you're going to get attorney's fees. Because we fought it, and they appealed as well. So when we went to this independent magistrate to decide this case, would you believe that I lost? Not only did I lose, I lost and I had to pay attorney's fees to the union because I had not negotiated birthday cakes. These are the kind of things that happen in government that you scratch your head and you say, what? But it does happen, and it happens every day, which is why elections have consequences. The people who are in leadership positions to make decisions matter. From local city elections, county elections, state legislative, congressional, president of the United States. Every single one has a consequence on government, and government, whether you like it or not, has a consequence on what happens to you. Now, as a conservative, I would like those consequences that government has on us to be as small and as minimal as possible. Socialism, which sucks, is the opposite. It believes that government should make every decision for you, to the point where it should decide what you get to eat, when you should get that food, what day, what time. And if you want to see what socialism looks like in practice, you don't have to go too far away from this state to see it. Cuba is a communist socialist dictatorship. Venezuela is a socialist dictatorship. Not two examples of where people and the population are very happy. You cannot get the most basic supplies that we take for granted here on a daily basis, that you could stop at any corner, Wawa or CVS, and pick up. They have to wait in line for hours to get. That's what socialism does. And we in this country right now, we are at a crossroads. The Democratic Party has basically turned into the Socialist Party. One of their candidates for president was, at least the only thing that I respected about Bernie Sanders was at least he admitted it. He said he was a socialist. At least he admitted it. The rest of the Democrats won't, but that's what they are pushing. That's what that party represents. And that's why the work that you guys do is so important. And you should be proud of being conservatives. And here's why. Because it's very easy to sell socialism. It sounds great. It's very easy to promise things to people for free. The problem is, and Margaret Thatcher said this, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And in this country, in this world that we live in this global economy where you can do most of your business from your cell phone, there are options. And the people who work hard and risk capital to create opportunities, create jobs, create businesses, they have options of other places to go. The harder you make it for them, the more expensive you make it for them, the more incentive you are giving them to go somewhere else and do it. And there are other places where they can do it, and now a lot of them are doing it, and they're leaving. Florida is an example within the country of the opposite. We have reduced regulations. We have reduced taxes 55 times over the last 5 years. We have made it easier here to create opportunity. And that's why businesses are flocking here, and people are flocking here from around the country and around the world. 600,000 people moved to Florida in the last 2 years. This is what our founding fathers intended with the 10th Amendment. Let the states make the decisions for their citizens. Citizens will decide what state they want to be in. And a lot of them are choosing Florida. Last year, Florida became the third largest state in the country. We overtook New York, which is now the fourth largest state in the country. One of the reasons that happened was because a lot of New Yorkers are moving to Florida. And somebody asked me on the campaign trail earlier this year or late last year, they said, well, what do you think about what Bill de Blasio and Cuomo are doing in New York? And I said, well, as a conservative, I could not disagree more with the policies and the way that they're running their government. But, frankly, as the Lieutenant Governor of Florida, I hope they keep it up, because our state is benefiting from it. People's net worth, large net worth individuals are moving to this state and investing in this state. They're buying real estate. They're buying new homes. They're setting up their residence here. And that creates more opportunities for others. And that's what you are working for. You are working to elect people who believe that the individual should make as many decisions for themselves, their family, their business, and their community as possible, and not government. Because I have a theory about politics and government. A lot of people who get elected to office get very passionate about an issue or a program, and then they write a law to create it. And they are very passionate, they believe in it. And then when they're successful, they stand behind a podium with a microphone and cameras to tout the success of that program that was created to solve a particular problem or issue. And then they move on to the next project, to the next goal. And they leave that program behind to be run by people who are not necessarily as passionate about it as they were. To be run by people who are just doing a job, frankly. Trying to do the best job, but they're never going to be as passionate or care as much about that program as the person who created it. And then that person who created it is on to the next thing, or may not even be around anymore to hold it accountable. And then it just becomes another program that does not run as well as it was intended to, and frankly does not serve those who it was meant to serve as well as it was intended to by the person who created it. And if you look in the federal government especially, there are dozens upon dozens upon dozens of programs like this, created by somebody who was passionate about it, but is not even, maybe not even around anymore. Yet there are people running it, and it just grows bigger and bigger and bigger, costs more and more and more, and actually makes less and less and less impact. And that's why, as conservatives, it's our job to go back and look at those programs, hold them accountable, and if necessary, eliminate them. And say no, no more. Enough is enough. That's that's another thing about being a conservative that is so important. Going back and looking at things that are already on the books and seeing if you should get rid of them. And that's why the work you do is so important. Because if you're not going to knock on a door, if you're not going to help people get elected, I'm telling you, not a lot of people will. The other side, the Democrats, they are more organized than we are. They've proven it. And we cannot take this election for granted. We are talking about the future of the United States of America as we know it. If we do not hold the line in 2016, we may not have a chance to do it in 18 or 20 or 22 or 24. This truly is the most consequential election in this nation's history. The things that are at stake are the very fabric of what our founding fathers intended when they wrote the Constitution of the United States of America. You know, a limited federal government is labeled as a Republican issue or a conservative issue. Do you know that it's not? A limited federal government is an American issue. Because when our founding fathers created the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the Republican Party didn't even exist. It was intended to, that's what the United States of America was supposed to be. It was supposed to be very powerful states and a very limited federal government. How many of you believe right now we have very powerful states and very limited federal government in this country? Not even one. But if you go back and you read the history of the Constitution, the history around each of the amendments of the Bill of Rights, and why they were added in the negotiations to actually get a Constitution drafted out of the Constitution Convention, it all came down to federal rights versus state rights. And the agreement was there would be a limited federal government, and the states would retain most of the power. And that's why a limited federal government is not a conservative principle, it's not a Republican principle. It is an American principle, because it's one of the founding principles of the United States of America. And the document that is the founding document of this country, which I call the instruction manual of this country, is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So when you guys are knocking on doors, when you guys are making phone calls, know that you are doing that. Those efforts are to protect that idea. Every minute you dedicate is a minute that goes to protect this country. Because if we lose that, then we're going to become just like any other country. Now, do you guys want this country to be just like any other country? Well, it doesn't sound very, energetic. And I know it's early, and I see a lot of yawning. You guys must have been out partying last night. But do you guys want this country to be like France? No. Do you want us to be like Spain? No. Do you want us to be like Venezuela? No. No, thank you. Or do you want us to be the same country that has created so much opportunity for so many people for 240 years? That's what your efforts are doing and protecting. And you should not be ashamed of it, and you should not be timid about it. You should be proud of what you are doing and proud of what you're working on. Because I guarantee you, every person whose door you knock on, whether they are first generation, second generation, third generation, they are somebody who is either someone who is a descendant of or someone who actually fled a place that is the opposite of what this country is and came to this country or to this state or to your state seeking opportunity and fleeing what you guys say sucks. And that's why you should be proud of it, and that's why you should be unrelenting in your arguments of why conservatism is the only thing that will actually ensure that the opportunity they came here to seek will continue to live on for generations that come. Because it's, like I said, it's very easy to promise things, but it's not very easy to pay for them if you run out of people who are willing to pay. And that's why I enjoy engaging with people who are Democrats every time I get, and I ask them, why are you a Democrat? You know what I hear more than anything else? Well, because my mom and dad were, and it's just what we always have been. Can I tell you that I've been in government and politics for, in one way or another, for 20 years? Can I tell you I've never, ever met anyone who has told me, I want to pay more taxes. I have never, ever come across anyone who has told me, I want to fill out more paperwork, more permits and licenses, so that I can run my business. I have never, ever met anyone who has told me, I think government knows how I should run my life better than I do. And I ask those three things of every Democrat that I encounter. Do you want to pay more taxes? No. Do you believe the taxes you're already paying are being spent wisely and with accountability? No. Do you want to fill out more paperwork and more permits and more licenses so that you can run your business or live your life? No. Do you believe that government and people who are elected in office have and should be making more decisions of how you run your life, what you should not, cannot be able to do? No. Well, then let me tell you, my friend, you're a Republican, not a Democrat. And that's what we need to do as a movement, as a conservative movement. Get back to the basic principles of what it means to be a Republican. Less taxes, less government, and more freedom. And resist the urge and to engage in what the other side wants us to engage in. Wedge issues designed to take us off of our message. Their wedge issues are there to get us off of our message and always have us playing defense instead of offense on what it means to be a Republican or a Democrat. And if you allow yourselves to resist that urge to defend and be on the offense about what it means to be a conservative, I believe you'll have the experience that I've had of finding people that say, no, I don't want to pay more taxes, or I at least don't feel like my taxes are being spent wisely. No, I don't want to fill out more paperwork. I don't want more licenses. I don't want more background checks. I don't want more, requirements to be able to run my business. No, I don't want people in elected office telling me what I should or should not do. I want them to leave me the hell alone. And if you break it down to that simple difference, because Democrats cannot say that they are the party that is for fighting for less taxes and more accountability in tax dollars. They cannot. They cannot say that they are the party that is fighting for less licensing and less laws and less background checks and less involvement of government in your business. They cannot say that they are the party that is the party of less involvement in how you run your life and how you live your life. They cannot. And if you make it a binary choice between those two things, you'll win that argument every single time. And that is what you guys need to spend your time doing when you're knocking on doors, when you're at events, when you're trying to get people registered to vote, make it a definition of what it means to be a Republican and what it means to be a Democrat. Because the Democrats, they play tricks. I've heard about stories where they will show up to naturalization events for registering people, and they ask them, do you believe in democracy? Yes, I do believe in democracy. I love America. Great, you're a Democrat. That's what, no. That's what they do. They trick the people, because for them, it's not about the ultimate goal, it's about the power. For us, it is about the power, but not for the people in government. For us, it's about putting the power back in the hands of the people who will elect those to government and pay for government. That's the difference. So we need to get it back down to the basic principles of what it means to be a Democrat and what it means to be a Republican. Because 10 times out of 10, you explain it very simply like that, I don't believe you'll find anybody who'll say they want to be a Democrat. Because what they represent where their party is going is representative, especially for people who are coming from other places, of the countries that they fled. And in this state, let me tell you, when you are meeting people who are coming from other states, people who come from New York, people who come from Connecticut, people who come from Illinois, who are Democrats, but they're coming here to enjoy the less taxes, the less government, and the more freedom. It's your job to tell them, well, then come here and don't vote for people who are going to turn this state into the state that you fled either. That's what the difference is today. That's what your efforts should strive to be. And if you're here, it's because you care. If you're here, it's because you want to make a difference. And let me tell you, every minute that you dedicate to this cause does make a difference. And this is the year to make a difference. So I thank you guys for what you do. I'm very proud to stand here before you, to see young leaders who one day will be here saying the message that I'm saying today to others. And I'm very, very excited to know that you guys are going to help us save our country. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have them. How do you step up to the mic? Okay, step up to the mic.
Good morning, Lieutenant Governor.
Morning.
What's the most important issue for this 2016 election season, and why?
I would say the most important issue for the 2016 election season is freedom versus oppression, or socialism, or whatever you want to call it. It's the most important issue is preserving the United States of America, because everything that is affected by if we lose control of this country, fiscal issues, foreign policy issues, trade issues, everything follows suit. So no matter what issue you care about, if we lose control, if we lose the majority of the Senate, if we lose majority of the House, if we lose the White House, if we lose legislative majorities, everything has a consequence. So every one of those issues could be affected. So keeping the majorities, I think, are the most important thing. And the most important issue is winning. We need to win.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Justin. Now I'm going to be that guy. So every time I've heard Marco Rubio speak, I felt good. But hearing you speak, I felt American. So I'm going to be the guy that asks, why Marco Rubio? And why did you back out? You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
I personally, I'm for you, so.
Thank you.
Like, go back.
Well, remember that campaign I told you about, the first one, the 96 campaign for Dole? That's when I met Marco. We've known each other since then. We've been friends since then. And contrary to what you may read, what you may believe, the person who asked Marco to reconsider was me. No, he would not have if I had not asked him to. And here's why I did. We'd spent a year campaigning on this race for the Senate. I mean, we put over 55,000 miles in the car, and it was one of the great experiences of my life traveling around this state running for this office. But if you look at the polling, there were still 50-60% undecided. And with those numbers, with that uncertainty on our part, on our side, and with the Democrats doing what they were doing, getting all of their efforts, all of their resources behind their preferred candidate, it wasn't hard to do the math. It was already going to be a difficult campaign, but because of maybe the lack of interest, it was going to be even more difficult on our side. We could have won it, but it was going to be very, very difficult. And the reason that I asked Marco to reconsider was because I knew that he gives us a better chance, the best chance of keeping this seat in Republican hands. And this Senate seat in Florida will most likely determine which party has the majority. So, he'd be a senator for 6 more years. Well, in the next 6 years, think about the things that the United States Senate could be dealing with. Supreme Court justices, definitely one, possibly others. Foreign policy, China, our relationship with China. Foreign policy in our own hemisphere, Cuba, Venezuela, South America, Central America, trade issues, fiscal policy. If we lose the majority, we lose on all those issues. We lose the Supreme Court. I mean, the Democrats would have no problem with using the nuclear option and creating and requiring only a 51-member majority to confirm a Supreme Court justice should Hillary Clinton be elected president. Now, a senator may only serve for 6 years. Supreme Court justices serve for life. Those impacts, those rulings, those decisions at times are irreversible and irrevocable. And I was not willing to take the risk because I care about this country way too much to risk it. And that's why I asked him to reconsider, because he was not intending on running. I guarantee you, he had spent more time in the last 30 days coming up with the offense and defense strategy for his son's football team than he did at dedicating time and energy to thinking about running for re-election. He had not intended on doing it. But I know, one, that he gives us the best chance of winning. And two, that he is a rock-solid conservative that will not let us down. And that's why I said, listen, you need to reconsider this. And that's why I asked him to reconsider it. Because he had no intention of reconsidering it, and he would not have reconsidered it had I not asked him. And it would have been very easy to say, you know what, I've been at this for a year. It's my time. It's my turn. And that's what too many people do in politics. They think about themselves more than they do about the greater good. And I made a decision that I needed to do what was better for the greater good, better for our movement, better for our party, better for our state, and better for our country. And that was to ensure and at least give Marco the opportunity to run for re-election. And that's why I asked him to do it, and I'm glad that he is doing it, and I'm backing him 100%, and I hope that all of you do too.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mariah. I have a question on you mentioned the whole limited government being an American thing. How do we convey that message to Democrats while also being compassionate? And I know that's something that a lot of conservatives struggle with. We're not for welfare, we want reform, and so people look at us like we're hateful and angry, and I want to kind of work on how do we convey that message.
That's a good question.
That party?
There's a couple books that you can read that I think would help you with that. One is by Arthur Brooks. He's the CEO of AEI. It's called A Conservative Heart.
I started that one. I haven't finished it.
It's a great book. Basically, what it says is if you care about social welfare, if you care about the safety net, and you care about helping people who need a leg up to help themselves, then you have to be a conservative, and it lays out why. And he lays out how the safety net, which is supposed to be under people to save them, has actually now become something over them, holding them down. That's what the safety net has turned into in this country, and he does a great job of explaining it, describing it, and using examples of, for instance, other countries where it has gone so far that it's actually hurting their economy and hurting the future prospects of the nation's ability to survive. And that's the road that we are headed on as a country if we don't stop and turn it around. You know, how many of you are in your 20s? So you're millennials, right? Okay, so in Spain, they have a generation that's not called millennials. And here we've had Generation X, which I think I'm a part of, Generation Y, Generation Z, millennials. Over there they have Generation Nini. Generation Nini. Ni trabajan, ni estudian. There's a whole generation that are just living in their parents' basements. And they're not working, they're not studying. And they're not going to be productive, they're not going to be producing or contributing to their country's economy going forward. And it's laid out in the book. Another book that you should read is by Senator Mike Lee. It's called Our Lost Constitution. And it's a short read, it's a quick read, but it goes through the Constitution Convention and the Bill of Rights, the debate, the back and forth between the two sides, federal government, state government, and then goes through each amendment of the Bill of Rights and describes the reason that it's in the Constitution and how it's been eroded since its implementation in the 200 plus years of judicial rulings and presidential overreach and congressional overreach. So those are two books that I think will help lay it out. And then I'm a big believer in when you're making an argument, and less is more. So break it down to the basics. Less taxes. Do you want to pay more taxes or less taxes? Do you want to have more government or less government?
Less government.
Do you want to be someone who has more freedom to make decisions for yourself or less freedoms?
More freedom.
Then you are a Republican.
So then how do we, but with those who say, well, you know, more government does this for people, how do you tell them, well, no, more government hurts these people? Because they say, well, you know, the more that they have, the more control that they can, like, give out money, the better. But if they run out of money, that's the problem. So when you try and tell them that, they're like, well, someone has to work. Well, then you work. That's where the argument falls in. I don't know if it's because they're choosing to not see your argument.
Another way to put it is instead of putting it in the perspective of the person you're speaking to, if they're a parent, for instance, ask them, do you want your son or your daughter to grow up to get federal assistance and live off federal assistance? No, I don't. Do you want your son or daughter to grow up to be an entrepreneur who invents the next iPhone and becomes a billionaire? Yes, of course. The next Mark Zuckerberg? Yes, of course. The next inventor of Uber, the next Elon Musk? Yes, well, the more freedoms or the less freedoms they have makes that more difficult. If you break it down to, binary decisions, do you want to be somebody who just gets a check and just lives off that bare minimum check with the federal government? Or do you want to be somebody who works hard, plays by the rules, and is the next inventor of the next great product? Or, it doesn't have to be that you are, the inventor of the company, the CEO of the company. Would you like to be, just somebody who is successful? Yes, well, be honest, it's not easy. We're not all going to win the lottery. To have success, you have to earn it. Everybody that's been successful has earned it and worked hard for it. And that's important too. Be honest about it. My family, when they came here with nothing. But they dedicated a whole decade to working hard and finding any job that they could, saving money, investing in a business and growing that business, and then helping others invest in their business and grow their businesses, and that's how they built success. It wasn't overnight, and it's never going to be overnight, and there is no such thing as instant gratification. It's working hard, setting goals, and achieving those goals. Thank you.
I was just wondering, just what some advice you have to young conservatives just to remain conservative and to just stay positive when they're defending their beliefs against the left.
Staying positive, the mainstream media doesn't make it easy, I'll be honest with you. But the easiest way to stay positive is knowing you're right. And you are, and we are. And that's the most important thing. Showing examples of how conservative or conservatism has made a difference in people's lives. And if you look at the 240 years of history of the United States of America, most of, if not all, the successes are because of conservatism and less government and not more. I mean, just think if Henry Ford had to deal with the EPA and the the long list of federal government agencies that would have regulated his Model T, his first car, the first car. Think of if he had to go through all those processes. Would we even be driving cars today, or would we still be in horse and buggies? So that's, break it down to the historical perspectives, and it's, if you tell stories about, what if this, then that kind of stuff works too. But it's very easy to be positive about being a conservative because you're right, and you are right. That is the right way for this country. That's what this country was based on, and that's what will continue to make this country so great.
Hi, so my question is what about the argument that conservatives kind of want to tell us how to live our lives, but just in a different way? I mean, if you look at, justice, usually a stance on drugs, a stance on immigration, like a lot of ways, aren't conservatives telling people how to live their lives in just a different way? I mean, like if you look at what happened in North Carolina, because I'm from there, where the city passed a stance, but then the state government tried to change it. So then, isn't it in a way like these conservatives are trying to impose their power more
No.
on like a smaller level of
In that
government?
particular example in North Carolina, the state government preempting the local government was imposing a new definition of how people should or should not conduct themselves in public. It was the state government saying, no, actually we're going to go back to the way it was, which was, this is how, it is.
I mean, I understand that, but at the same time, at a local level of government, haven't more people had a say in who they elected? And so, isn't it almost saying like that those groups of people and like who they elected, they're not getting necessarily their values represented because the state government's trying to override that smaller level of government?
More people actually elected the people who were in the state government than in the local government.
But that represents the whole state. What about the local level? Like that group of people might have those beliefs and be okay with that, but then the state government's trying to say, no, these people aren't gonna, like, because the problem with democracy, because technically we're a constitutional republic, so the whole democracy thing isn't even right. Isn't it unfair to say, like, the majority of the state wants this, but what about this small group of people at a local level and what they want?
Well, it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to get it right. And sometimes, and one of the more dangerous things that I found in government is the movement of government in a particular direction, especially at the local level, because of a vocal minority, a minority that is much louder than the silent majority. And it is the responsibility of those in higher positions of accountability to speak for that silent majority. Too many times, a lot of times you'll see in local government meetings, they'll fill an auditorium with a couple hundred people. But the decisions there affect thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And they didn't all show up either. And a lot of these organizations who their job is to organize these people to show up, sometimes is misleading and misrepresents what the community or the population of that area really intends. And then that's how elections are supposed to be the ultimate accountability. So the people who voted for something that the majority was not in favor of, in theory, are supposed to go and show up at the ballot box and vote them out. And that's why what you guys do is so important, because the other side is more organized than we are. They are better at getting their people out. They are better at motivating people to show up at the ballot box. What you guys do is the response. You guys, your efforts are supposed to get our side, the silent majority, out to vote and speak their mind at the ballot box and elect the people who they want making the decisions for them. That's the point of what we're here to do today, and there's a big sign in the back that says stop, so I guess that means I have to stop. So
Are you going to be around?
I will be around for a little while longer, yes. Thank you all. Thank you.